mate. If someone said to you they were heading up to Vegas for a holiday, would you know where they were off to? What about if they're off to the Apple Isle or the Territory? Do you know your geography, mate? Do you know what a Brisbaneite is? A banana bender? A Taswegian? A cockroach? Mate, if someone said their mate had two heads because of where he was from, where would he be from? Well, mate, have no fear. After I'm finished with you, you'll know where you've been, where you're going, and what you can call people when you find out which part of Oz they're from, as well as which outrageous Aussie stereotypes you can make. So, mate, on the matter of Aussie geography and its lingo, the first thing you have to understand is that Australia's a bloody big place, but it doesn't have a lot of people in it. By way of example, mate, Oz is about 80% of the size of the USA, but only has 0.07 of the population. That's about 20 million people, mate. Fewer people than in Mexico City. In all of Oz, mate. Anyway, mate, we've established that Oz is bloody huge. Luckily, though, we can break it down to 6 states and 2 territories. We'll work through them one by one, mate, and I'll let you know what they're called, as well as the major lingo associated with each of them. So, mate, let's start by having a think about what the bloody hell Croc's on about here.
Banana bender, eh? Mate, they're all mad as cut snakes up there. But anyway, mate, what can I get you?
There are 2 things for you to note here, mate. First of all, he called you a banana bender. This means that he thinks you're a Queenslander, which is what we call someone from the state of Queensland. The second thing to note is that he thinks that Queenslanders are as mad as cut snakes. This is part of the Queensland stereotype, mate. Generally, Queenslanders are seen as being slow-speaking with a broad or country accent. They also take life slower than, say, the typical stressed-out Sydney executive. And of course, mate, let's not forget that to a lot of Aussies, Queenslanders are considered as mad as cut snakes. What's more, mate, the further north you go, the greater chance you'll have gone troppo, which is a mythical condition that strikes those who spend too much time in the horrific heat and humidity that you find in far north Queensland.
Mate, you've obviously gone troppo from spending too much time up north. You're not in bloody Queensland now, mate.
And of course, if someone has gone troppo, then chances are they also suffer from mango madness, which is a similar ailment. Anyway, mate, the capital of Queensland is called Brisbane, which is also known as Brizzy by the locals and Brizzo by some Sydney-siders. Recently, Brizzy's also acquired the tag of Briz Vegas, which is quite popular with the youth and is often shortened just to Vegas by those in the know. Hey mate, I heard you're heading back to Vegas for the weekend. As you move further north, mate, you'll eventually come up to Cairns, which is popular as a gateway to the Great Barrier Reef, or just the reef. Did you get that, mate? Cairns. Non-Aussies often have trouble with that, mate, so it's a good one to practice. Cairns. Cairns. You'll get it, mate. Of course, mate, if you head west of Cairns, or west of anywhere on the Queensland coast, you'll eventually get to the famed outback. What is the outback, mate? Where is it? Well, as we found out, there's no certain answer to this.
Nah, mate. I mean, discover who I am, as an Aussie. Find out me true character. I'm talking about the outback, mate. I think I'm going to go walk about in the outback till I work out who I am. That way, if I cark it, I'll cark it knowing me dinky-die identity.
Right. Look, Jono, well, best of luck, mate. But I've got to meet me, old China down at the Rubbity for a pig's ear.
Bruce? Which way is the outback?
Oh, struth, mate. I don't bloody know. You know most Australians wouldn't know the outback from a bloody platypus.
Yeah, well, mate, we have to go somewhere, don't we?
Well, mate, just drive away from the coast for about 8 hours and then we'll see how we're going.
How will we know when we're there?
Mate, you'll know that we're there when you see a sign that says bloody whoop whoop. Now drive. Basically, mate, to most Aussies the outback's somewhere far away from the coast. Most Aussies spend their lives driving up and down the coast, mate. And, as I said, They would know the outback from a cockatoo. Queensland doesn't have a monopoly on the outback though, of course, mate. Every one of Australia's states has a vast emptiness people prefer not to think about too much. Anyway, mate, that's enough on the cane toads, as the Queenslanders are also known. Let's keep moving down to Australia's oldest and richest state, New South Wales. No one really knows why it's called New South Wales, mate, but it is, and it's home to 6 million New South Welshmen, as they're known. Most of them, about 4 million of the buggers, live in Sydney, so they're also known as Sydney-siders. There aren't really many New South Wales stereotypes, but there are certainly Sydney stereotypes, mate. To Aussies outside of Sydney, Sydney-siders are seen as being, well, a bit too obsessed with making money. They're seen as a bit too rushed, perhaps to the point of being rude. Flat out like a lizard drinking, mate. That's the way they're seen.
Struth, big fella. Sydney this, New South Wales that. Be buggered if I'm going to let honest Victorians start ordering schooners in my pub. A schooner has no place in this state, mate. No place at all. Fair dinkum, mate. Leave the opera house at the door, would you?
And also, mate, between you and me, they're perhaps also seen as thinking they're a bit better than the rest of us. Wearing their fancy Sydney clothes and having their fancy Sydney ways. Up Queensland way they're known, quite unfairly, as Sydney wankers. So if some poor bloke is up from Sydney, minding his own business, and say wants to eat a meat pie with a fork, a Brisbaneite might say, "You Sydney wanker." But of course, mate, you just can't generalise about 4 million people. And Sydney itself sees itself as a modern, international city, and a beautiful one at that, and much more relaxed about the way it does things than, say, London or New York. What's more, mate, there are plenty of rugby league watching Sydney-siders hiding out in the burbs who are just as relaxed as the majority of Queenslanders. Anyway, mate, that's enough of the Queensland-New South Wales rivalry. Let's talk about the one down south. So if you're in Sydney and drive some 10 hours south, you'll end up in the city of Melbourne in the state of Victoria. Got that, mate? Melbourne. Not Melbourne, Melbourne. It's in Melbourne that the Melburnians live. And it's in Victoria that the Victorians live. The main thing Melbourne is known for is being the birthplace of Aussie rules, the great Australian game of footy. And mate, they're all bloody mad for it down there. They're also known for their cold beaches, in contrast to Sydney's warm beaches and Queensland's warmer beaches, and for wearing black. Also, mate, I must say up front that the Melbourneites tend to consider themselves a bit more European than other Australians. Why this is I'm not so sure, mate, because they certainly don't seem to act in a European fashion when they're out in the town or they're barracking for someone at the footy. Perhaps it's because they have a more Victorian architecture than other cities. Or perhaps it's because they had those newfangled outdoor coffee shops before the rest of us did. Whatever the reason, mate, Sydney-siders would say it's absolute rubbish. And the truth of the matter is that Melbourne reached its peak in about 1880 and has been on a downward slide ever since. Well, mate, at least that's what Sydney-siders would say if they were stirring them. Anyway.